سلام علیکم قوتابیانی خۆشەویست شوێنەکەشم تاری کردوتم بەدەم چاوم زۆر ڕووناک دەرنەچێ دوایاڵەن ئەوە گەنجە بەوتم با تۆزە خۆم پێر نیشاندەم. بابەتێکی گرنگ لە پۆلی 12 هەیە، بابەتی پاسیف. ویستم مامۆستایەکی ئینگلیز بۆ خۆی دەرسەکە شەرەحکە لە زمانی ئەوە ئەگەر گوێ بگرن ڕەنگە بۆ وشە بۆ زمان لەبەروی خۆی نیتیڤ سپیکەرە باشتر فێر بن چۆنێتی گۆڕینی ڕستەیەکی ئاکتیڤ بۆ ڕستەیەکی پاسیف.
Jill@ingvid.com, and today's lesson is on the active voice and the passive voice, and this is in response to a request that someone left on the YouTube comments to explain the difference and why do we use active or passive. Okay, so here is an explanation. So normally it's best to use the active voice. It's easier and it tells you more. It tells you who did the action if you use the active. If you start using the passive, it can become a little bit complicated how to put the words together. So the active voice is the boy kicked the ball. So kicked is the verb. Ball receives the action. So the ball is the object. So we've got subject, verb, object. A simple active sentence. Okay. So you know who did the action, and you know also something that received the action. So if you turn that into the passive, it sounds a little bit strange. You wouldn't normally, well, there might be a reason, but I'll give you that in a minute. So if you change it to passive, you make the object the subject of the sentence. You start with the ball as the subject. It's all about the ball now. What happened to the ball? The ball was kicked. The ball was kicked. And you can add by the boy. The boy did the kicking. The ball was kicked by the boy. Or you can just say the ball was kicked. One reason why you might say it that way is if a ball is kicked by somebody and it breaks a window, and you don't know who kicked it, then that's all you can say. You could say somebody kicked the ball, so somebody would become the subject, but you can also turn it into the passive and say the ball was kicked and it broke the window, it hit the window and broke it. So that's sometimes a reason for using passive, because you don't know. Sometimes we don't know who did the action. So you can't say who did it. So you may have to use passive because of that. Or maybe perhaps you do know who did it, but you don't want to say. Again, you don't want to get somebody into trouble. It could be something like that. You don't want to say who did it. Or sometimes it's just not important for that piece of information. It may not be important who did it. Okay. So the main thing is that with the active voice, the agent of the verb, the person who does the action, here is the boy, and the recipient. So the agent is the subject, and the recipient of the action is the object in the active sentence. Okay, but then that changes in the passive. So let's just look at some more. That's a strange example, really, but let's look at some quite normal examples of how the passive is often used. Okay, so if you order something on the internet, you might
ئەفرەتە بەنەم هەڵبژارد لەبەر یەکۆ هۆیەکەشی ئەوەیە تۆزێک بە سەبری قسە دەکات زیاتر بینەران ئەوانەی تەمەشایان ڤیددیۆ دەکەن دەتوانن ئیسفادەی لێ بکەن لەبەرەوەی ئەوانەی ئینگلیزیان باش نییە ئەگەر بێت و بە سەبری قسە بکات ئەوە باشتر لێ تێدەگا کۆمەڵێک نمونەشی داوە لە خوارەوە ئەو نمونانە هەر هەمووی پاسیڤن بۆ نمونە یەکەم your order will be sent يعني will be زائدن pp واتە ئەوە پاسیڤە یان this house was built کەواتە was built بە هەمان شێوە پاسیڤە was زائدن pp his car has been stolen کەواتە has been stolen کەواتە بە هەمان شێوە پاسیڤە
I get a confirmation to say we've received your order, we've received your payment, we are going to deliver your order, we are sending it, but they might put it this way: your order will be sent by standard delivery, for example. They could say we will send your order, but very often they use this passive form, your order will be sent. That's just the sort of style that is often used when you're ordering things that way. So that's passive. These are all passive examples. Your order will be sent. Okay. Another one, if you're looking at a house, and it might be old, or this isn't very old, but it could be much older, but you're not particularly interested in who the builder was at the time, but you want to know, you're interested to know how old is the house, when was it built. So this house was built in 1960. So it would be very unusual to know, going back so far in time, the name of it wouldn't just be one builder, it would be lots of builders. So, but maybe a company name or something like that, a building firm. But it would be unusual to know so far back in the past what company of builders built the house, and also that's not your main concern. This is where it's not so important. You just want to know when the house was built and how old it is. So this house was built in 1960, and that gives you the information you want to know. Okay. Right. So then another example. Somebody has lost his car. You say his car has been stolen. He left it parked in the street, and overnight it has disappeared. It looks as if it has been stolen. So in this kind of, a crime has been committed probably. Somebody has taken his car, but it's very unlikely that you would know who did it. The main issue here is that his car has been stolen and he needs to do something about it. He needs to report it to the police, to his insurance company, etc. So, of course, it is important in one way to know who did that. You would like to know to be able to punish the person who did it. But in the immediate, moment of finding the car has gone, the main thing is to know that the car has been stolen. That's the main important point. Okay. So you can't say who stole it because you don't know. Okay. Right, so then with the book, if you have a book that you're reading, the book was published last year. Okay, so you might want to say the name of the publisher, but normally you might want to know how old is this book. So that's the main point you want to get across, or to know. Oh, it was published last year. It's a very recent book. It's a new novel or something like that. So it was published last year. So it's quite a recent book. That's the main thing. You're not too bothered about who the publisher was. You might be interested to know who the author is, but that name will be on the cover, so that's fine. But just to say that it was published very recently, was published, is passive. Okay, somebody published it, but you're not saying who. Right. And then another very familiar set of wording. In the exam, you will be tested on, okay, on spelling and grammar, whatever it is, on your fluency in English, anything like that. They could say, we will test you on, if in the exam we will test you on, that would be the active form. But here, quite often with exam information, it's put in the passive to be less sort of personal, a little bit more distant. There's a kind of distance, really, with the passive voice. So in the exam, you will be tested on is passive. And then finally, in this half of the lesson, somebody is going to a party and they ask you, are you going to Jack's party? And, you say party? Oh, I haven't been invited to the party. You're not sort of saying, oh, Jack, he hasn't invited me. Oh, so you feel a bit, you don't really want to say, because you don't want to sound as if you're angry with Jack for not inviting you, but haven't been invited. You're sort of keeping a distance from the situation and saying, well, no, I'm not going actually, because I haven't been invited. So, I have other things to do anyway, so that's all right. And you sort of tactfully reply. So to use the passive there is a sort of tactful, if you're trying to be tactful, diplomatic, then you might use the passive again, because you don't want to give a name of who was it who didn't invite you. Sometimes it's somebody who doesn't do something just as much as someone who does do something. So it works both ways. Okay, so I hope that gives you some useful examples of how the active and the passive are different, and we'll just move on to the second part of the lesson now, where I have a little test for you. Okay, so let's do a little test, and here I've written some sentences which are active sentences, and I'd like you to try to put them into the passive. Okay, so let's just run through them first. Someone asked me to repair the window. That's the broken window that the ball hit. The chef told us to clean the kitchen before starting to cook. Active. The chef is the subject. Jack didn't invite me to his party. The artist created this sculpture in 1950. The marketing firm paid me to hand out leaflets in the street. I'll explain some of the vocabulary as well as we go through. Don't worry, if there's a word you don't know. So the milliner, that's someone who makes hats, made this hat last year, and someone asked me to explain active and passive verbs. Okay, so those are all active sentences. Let's now change them to passive. So, first of all, someone asked me to repair or to fix the window, the broken window. So how do you turn that into passive? So I'm the object here. Someone asked me. So we have to change me to the subject. So me in the subject is I. Okay. So we have to take away someone and say I, and then it's past tense. So I was asked, take out me, and there we have it. This is now the passive. I was asked, without saying who did the asking. I was asked to repair the window. So now that's passive, right? So then the chef, the guy, usually a man, in charge of a big kitchen, a restaurant kitchen, or a big industrial kitchen, the chef told us to clean the kitchen before starting to cook. So the chef told us here, us, we are the object, but we need to change us to the subject. So just like me to I, it goes us to we. Okay. So we, and it's past tense again. So we need we were told to clean the kitchen before starting to cook. Okay, that's now passive. Next one, here's Jack. So me is the object.
زۆربەی ڕستەکان وەکو یەکەن، یعنی بۆ نمونەکە ڕستەی یەک دەڵێ someone asked me to repair the window، دیارە لە دوای asked me هاتووە me ئۆبجەکتەکەیە کە دەکەنە سەرەتا ئەبێ بێگۆڕین بۆ I. بۆ نمونە ڕستەی دوم as هاتووە، as ئۆبجەکتەکەیە دەکەنە سەرەتا دەبێتە we. ئەو چۆنیتی گۆڕینی ئەو شانەیە. بۆ نمونە هی سێمیش بە هەمان شێوە، لە دوای invite me هاتووە، میەکە دەکەینە I. زۆربەی ڕستەکان بەو شێوازەیە بە هیوام سوودێکی لێوەرگرن، هەم بۆ زمان هەم بۆ قوتابیانی پۆلی 12. سوپاس بۆ گوێگرتن.